5 months. That's how long these protests in Hong Kong have been occurring. Originally, they started out as protesting an extradite bill, which, if passed, would have brought prisoners and anyone accused of any crime against the Communist Party of China to be extracted to the mainland. Now, this kind of seems if I were to make it into a historical perspective, this kind of seems familiar in terms of when we were a British colony, the United States of America, and when at the time after the Boston Massacre, I believe this occurred, when King George actually said that all trials should be held in England and not in the colonies, and that was definitely a loss of sovereignty and autonomy and power at the time, which definitely brought us into the American Revolution. And something like similar has occurred. Now, the extradite bill was just scrapped entirely, which the officials in Hong Kong thought that these protests would simply go away. They didn't. I mean, it's already been 5 months since the start of the protests on March 31st. And it doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon. It doesn't. A lot of Hong Kong is up in arms as a result. Millions have come out into the streets. There have been many reports from trying to close down the international airport in Hong Kong to even the Chinese government sending APCs and other military personnel to the outside of the border with Hong Kong. That's how bad this has escalated. And everyone is going to result in something similar to Tiananmen Square. And I would definitely agree with them on that. Unfortunately, I definitely would agree on that because the Hong Kong, while it's still autonomous, it has remained autonomous, it still hasn't really supported the idea of a Second Amendment, having firearms, especially with having the yoke being collared by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, a lot of people in Hong Kong are definitely saying that they definitely want something similar to the Second Amendment that we have. In fact, there's been a lot of pictures and video that provide evidence to that. But nonetheless, I think that the military of the PRC is definitely going to come in and try to dispel this protest. And again, I think it's going to be something similar to what happened in Tiananmen Square. However, Hong Kong is not Beijing. While Beijing happens to be the capital and definitely the center of power of the Chinese Communist Party, which makes sense because that's where they tend to station themselves, and that's where all the laws occur, and that's where they have the highest amount of authority. Hong Kong is on the sea, where it remains to have not only its own identity, but has major access to the outside world. In this case, the West, and that's something that Beijing doesn't have. So, before I want to say my conclusions about how I think that things will go about, aside from the crackdown, I think we should explain more on why this is occurring, the current amount of protest. And we already know about the political situation with Hong Kong being pro-democratic and as such, and definitely being a major hotspot for the Chinese democratic movement. But I want to talk about something else when it comes to both history and cultural identity. Back in 1843, Britain and China went to war with each other a few times, called the Opium Wars. China was crushed, And in one of the unequal treaties that they have, that this allowed China to give the, or well, this forced China to give a piece of territory to the United Kingdom to act as a training port into China, because at the time they had even now they still have exotic luxuries and resources that the West would definitely love to have, and that came into the form of Hong Kong. Eventually, that trade port became a major hub, a gateway for China, a bridge between the West and the East, and it became a mix of different ideas and cultures as well. While they still retained a little bit of a Chinese identity, it a lot more influence of the West, especially since it was controlled by the British at the time, provided it to have a little bit make it a little different, especially with the amount of Western influence. Now, fast forward to 1997, China gets that territory back, and there's already this deal about making Hong Kong still retain some of its autonomy in the form of one country, two systems. And this deal was supposed to last, what I believe to be 50 years. Although I can't remember at the top of my head at this point. But nonetheless, that doesn't matter. Nonetheless, Hong Kong still retained its own autonomy to make its own decisions, its own laws to a certain extent. And now, with the current push by the Chinese Communist Party, it's beginning to feel like there's a big major crackdown on Hong Kong and just a betrayal of this agreement. And again, it's because of the whole idea of autonomy and having its own identity as a result. This all started because of the Opium Wars, and this is what made Hong Kong into what it is today, a port city that it has major access to the outside world. Now, how does this fit into culture? Like I said before, it was an influx of identities: Chinese identity, British identity, Western philosophy, etc., etc., etc. You name it. So when as the Chinese are beginning to push their own authority on the city of Hong Kong, it's definitely would feel like it attacked on their own identity as a major city, because I mean, obviously Hong Kong is not China. It has its own, like I said before, its own separate laws, its own separate values. Hell, they speak both English and Chinese over there. I've even heard from people that they speak more English than they do Chinese in Hong Kong. Although I cannot confirm that whatsoever. And this is definitely having a major impact, because whenever a culture or a new identity is attacked, there is going to be a lot of people that will rise up as a result, because they of them will have a natural idea of being sort of relaying to that identity. And I think that's what the Chinese Communist Party is missing, because Hong Kongers have have a much bigger identity of their own selves as a city than they do with the rest of China, which happens to be more communist, more authoritarian, totalitarian, and just more controlling. While Hong Kong is more loose, more freer than the rest of mainland China. One would even argue that it would be somewhat of the equivalent to Taiwan, although Taiwan is its own separate entity under the control of the Republic of China government. Now, to conclude this video, I think that there will be a crackdown. However, things are not going to go the same way as they have been before, because unlike Beijing, Hong Kong happens to be a seaport. Like I said before, it has major access to the outside world when it comes to information. If they are to completely suppress the information that about stuff like communist tyranny, the crackdown in Tiananmen Square, or even the possible crackdown in Hong Kong. They will have to stop everything. They will have to stop the internet. They will have to stop airports. They will have to stop shipping, and that will take a major blow on China. And let's not forget that there will be a heavy backlash by the international community. At least, that's what I think will occur. There will definitely be a backlash of some kind, and this will not look good for the communists at all. While it is true that they retain their power over they will retain their power, then they hold many of the cards. It nonetheless will not look good for them having to suppress a city that obviously wants to have a more democratic process on mainland China. It's definitely not going to look good for them, and at the same time, they're not going to suppress this. This is even if somehow they manage to stop the internet, they manage to stop air traffic or even sea traffic in Hong Kong, without any of that economic disadvantage that comes along with that, there will still be a few issues. One, there will be civic journalists from foreign entities that will still report on this. Number two, that there will be a major word of mouth, because a lot of the time, while the information itself would be suppressed, there will be talks by the generation that actually had to deal with something like that to the next generation, and then the next generation, and then the next generation. This inevitably will create a major divide between Hong Kong and mainland China. Even if China wins and manages a successful crackdown, they will still lose, because that resentment will still be there. Honestly, I hope that the people of Hong Kong do succeed. I really do. But that's a very, very slim chance at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese Communist Party actually is trying to infiltrate these protests in order to make them have a bad reputation and try to discredit them at any point. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But nonetheless, I really pray for Hong Kong to be free. I really do. Nonetheless, it's just, I think I still believe that there will be a huge amount of resentment. I mean, there already is a huge amount of resentment in Hong Kong, but I think after a major crackdown, it will still be there. And it's just going to be a part of that identity for Hong Kongers for many, many generations. That's what I believe will occur. Because even if China does succeed in this short-term period of trying to stop the democratic movement in Hong Kong, they will still lose the important thing: the mind of the next generation. My name is Omi, and on the Truth. Please post your comments down below, like this video, and subscribe. Also, if you have any criticisms about how I do my videos, either post them down in the comment section below, or directly message me up above. Thank you.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain.